And before we move on to native VLANs and trunk ports, let's just to prove the situation, what we'll do is we'll do a conf t, we'll go to global config mode, we'll say line VTY 0 space 15, we'll say password Cisco, and then we'll say login. So now we've configured the virtual terminal access for Telnet, and now we should be able to Telnet in from the PC, and we'll give that a try. So we'll go here and we'll say, instead of ping, we'll say telnet 192.168.99.2 and hit enter, and sure enough gives us a password, and now we've telnet into the switch. We cannot get to privileged mode because we've not set an enable password on the switch yet. To do that, it's pretty easy. We'll just end here, do a conf t to get to global config mode, and we'll say enable secret password, so it's encrypted, and we'll just put the same password again, Cisco. Alright, enable secret Cisco, and now we have full access from the PC to telnet into the switch and completely remotely administer the switch. Right? Now once again, this switch here has the IP address 192.168.99.2 on interface VLAN 99. Right? So, management VLAN. Now, let's talk about trunks. And for talking about trunks, what we're going to do is we're going to take another switch. We'll get this 2960 switch and we'll bring it out over here, right? And essentially what we could have is a scenario where we have another PC, let's say on the default VLAN. We could have another PC on the student VLAN, which is VLAN 50, right? All right, we'll just say that right there, right? So we could have a scenario like that, and we'll plug them in accordingly. So we'll say this PC is on port 5 again, and this PC is going to be on port port 10, right? And so now we want these PCs to be able to communicate from one building, let's say, or from one floor in one building to another floor, right? And these PCs are hooked up to this switch, and these PCs are hooked up to this switch, but they need to be a part of the same network. And to make them part of the same network, they need to be part of the same VLAN. So what we need to do is we need to assign VLAN 50 to port 10, and port 5 is already part of VLAN 1, right? So 192.168.1. Let's say make him 101, right? And then this PC 192.168.50.102. So if we've got 50.101, 50.102, 1.100, 1.101. And we'll have to configure these IP addresses in the IP configuration tool here. Right, I think that's the number we wanted to give him. Yep. Notice I'm not putting in a gateway because there's no router right now. So I'm not putting in a gateway. All right. And for this one, all right, that looks good. Okay. Now we want to set up communications between these two switches. So here's the options we have. Now for switch to switch, we're talking a crossover cable. So click on cables, click on crossover cable, and then we will, one more time, crossover cable. We'll go port 1 to port 1. right? So now we have a crossover link. Now, port 1 on this switch is the same as port 1 on this switch. They're part of the default VLAN, right? So they're automatically part of what we would say is VLAN 1, right? Which is also known as the default VLAN, right? So these two PCs right off the bat should be able to communicate with each other. So we'll open up this command prompt. And you can see that, sure enough, this PC can communicate with this PC, right? But it's not going to be able to communicate with this PC, right? Because he's on a separate VLAN. And it's not going to be able to communicate with this PC because this PC has a separate network address here. The network address is wrong here. They're on separate networks essentially. And let's configure first of all. So there's two choices. What we could do is, if we want to communicate from here to here, we could take another port on the switch and communicate it and configure it for VLAN 50, essentially having two connections going from here to here, right? But then you waste two ports on this switch and you waste two ports on this switch. So one port for VLAN 1 and one port for VLAN 50, right? And you need two cables just so this PC can communicate with this PC and this PC can communicate with this PC, right? And you're wasting two ports on each switch. A better way to do it is to set up a trunk going across. That way both VLANs can communicate across the trunk because a trunk can carry multiple VLANs. It's like a VLAN superhighway. So that's the better way to do it. Now, before we do that, we do have to configure port 10 here on this switch for VLAN 50. So let's do that really quickly. So type enable conf t interface FA0/10 and we'll do tab switch port mode access switch port access VLAN 50, right? Now notice what happened here. I did something different than I did last time. I just went switch port access VLAN 50, but I hadn't created VLAN 50 first. So the switch responds with, hey, access VLAN does not exist, and then it creates VLAN 50 on the fly for me. And that was pretty nice, right? It did that automatically because I had never created VLAN 50 on this switch. So that was pretty nice. Now, if we go to look at it though, it's not going to have the nice name that I gave the other one, right? Right? The name here is VLAN 0050, right? And that's not exactly VLAN and then student, right? So that wasn't that nice. So we could always, let's see if we can fix that. Conf t VLAN 50 name student. And now we'll do that. We'll do a show VLAN. And you can see now the name is nice. It says student, right? Okay. Okay, where I left off was I have VLANs on these two switches. I've got VLAN 1, the default VLAN, and a PC on that, and a PC on that. And they can communicate across this link because this link is, by default, part of VLAN 1. Just because every port on the switch, by default, is part of VLAN 1. Now, if I want this PC is on VLAN 50 and has a 50 network, to talk to this PC who's also on the 50 network and on VLAN 50. If I want them to be able to talk across, then one option that I have, and I mentioned this before, is grabbing another crossover cable, attaching it to port 02, attaching it to this switch to port 02, and then putting those ports on VLAN 50. So I'll just label them. So VLAN 50, right? And so I need to put ports 2 on VLAN 50, and then this PC will be able to communicate with this PC, right? because we'd have a link, an access link on VLAN 50, right? And we can do that. It's easy enough. But you're wasting 2 links on your port. You're wasting essentially 4 ports instead of just 2 if you decide to change and say, no, no, no. Instead of doing that, let's just make 1 link across and make it a trunk. So that's what we'll do. So I'm going to cancel this, and I'll deselect, and I'll cancel that link, right? And I'll cancel this right here and this right here, and we'll make this link across a trunk instead. So